Hello everyone, Canon Lowy here, with my MetaMorph League review. The Atlas changes with Conquerors of the Atlas, and just the balance changes that Grinding Gear Games have made, as well as my brief thoughts on the Path of Exile 2 announcement. So I'm guessing that this one's going to be a little bit longer, so I'm going to put the topics that I talk about in timestamps in the video description if I can. So, MetaMorph League is a league that focuses on creating really insane bosses by forming together monster attacks all into one unique boss. So I decided to show this off in the Ossuary just to make it hopefully easier. So currently, all you need to do is kill an enemy with the green icon, as shown here, and they drop an organ, and you need to collect up 5 organs altogether. So let's see if I can do that. You need 5 different types. You need an eye, liver, lung, heart, and brain in order to create one. So hopefully I can do this pretty quick here. Currently, the league starter that I am working with is a Claw Cyclone Impaled Duelist. I had briefly mentioned this in the Milestone Blight League video, basically. And it doesn't seem to want to give me the right organ here. Okay, I think I might have them all. What is kind of weird is that at the very beginning of the league, on the first day, the main character, Thane, Octavius, he would actually show up automatically whenever you would have enough organs to create a metamorph, and I don't think that's really the case anymore, so I need a lung. So what you need... Yeah, so here you need brains, eyes, lungs, hearts, and livers in order to create one. Well, that was a pretty juicy chest right there. It's not giving me the organs that I need, though. Wow, what is with these rare stone boxes here? Okay, reward, not super amazing, but... Okay, here's some more organs over here. Okay, we got a liver. I need a lung, dang it. So yeah, this is kind of a problem of MetaMorph League, is that in areas I had found that sometimes it just refuses to give you the right organs that you need in order to create a metamorph, and to be honest, that is quite frustrating, and in many cases I just didn't really bother with the league mechanic while I was leveling all that much, because while fighting metamorphs were rewarding and cool and everything, is situations like this would happen where I would clear a whole entire area and then it just did not give me 5 different organs in order to create the metamorph, and that's pretty annoying. So let's see if there's any... Doesn't even look like there is any point steps here. So I might need to recreate the instance. Oh, there's one in here. And he doesn't drop what I need. Nice. So that happens quite a lot, actually, from my experience, or at least it feels that way. I don't know. So I'm gonna restart the make a new instance here. So my thoughts about this league, it's okay. I would have to say that I don't enjoy it as much as Blight League or Legion was. I thought those were a lot better, more enjoyable for me personally. And of course I get along right away as soon as I start a new one. Nice. But at the same time, it is actually really refreshing to do a bossing league rather than a mob-based one. So I think it definitely does its job there. And I don't know what is with this lag here. So I think it's definitely what was done correctly, that having the bossing league rather than a mob league after we've had mob leagues for the past few times. So I think that is quite refreshing. And of course it's a matter of actually creating one. So let's see what I need here. Okay, I need a heart. Shouldn't be too hard, I hope. So overall, this league, it's okay. I just personally do not like it as much as the previous leagues. And I will say though that the Metamorphs have been definitely some of the hardest bosses that I've actually ever faced in Path of Exile. Like, for an example, oh, there we go. I guess he shows up automatically. Still, is that it says that it uses a certain skill from the monsters. Okay, so Thorn Spheres, Lunging Strike, Bone Slash, Quake Slam, and Desecrated Spray. And when it says that it uses a certain skill, expect that the monster will spam that skill. And what I mean by this is that while it was leveling in the one Undying boss, unique enemy in the slums of Sarn in Act 3, the one that throws out either ethereal knives or bear traps, when I put him into a metamorph, so yes, you can put like act bosses and everything in the metamorph thing, which is really cool to get extremely good amounts of loot. But anyway, that boss, he would throw out like 20 bear traps at a time, and I'm not exaggerating. Like, he would fill like his all around him with bear traps in one go whenever it would use that skill. So things like the Thorn Spheres, whenever it changes that monster to use that skill, it's probably going to use a lot of it. So that is kind of what makes them so difficult in a way, and they're also quite unpredictable, which monster it decides to use the skill of at a time. So once you put all your organs in here, you can create a metamorph, and you have this vial here, and if you fill it up, you can get a unique organ as a drop for killing it, and that organ you can use to create a, if you get 5 of them, you can create a super boss in Thane's laboratory. So if you want a really, really hard boss to fight, that is a way to go if you can. I'm going to do this trade quick here. And of course, while I'm recording, I get a super good trade, or at least I'm selling a valuable item. So that is a very good.
The first ones are watching.
Yeah, this league as well, I don't know what the deal is, but it almost seems like
Greeting. Best prepare.
it almost seems like I get more currency than I have ever done before. I have gotten 2 6 links so far this league already, and which is interesting to say the least. I'm actually wearing one of the ones that I got. Unfortunately, it's corrupted, so there's that. Okay, so back to it. Where did he go? Okay. Kill all the things around it to kind of showcase this. So yeah, whenever he uses the projectiles, as you can see here, he kind of spams it across the arena here. And also they are quite tanky depending on stuff. So even though that I'm currently level 83, he's still pretty tanky. Ooh. That's a juicy drop there. So yeah, that's MetaMorph League overall. Picking up the organs especially is a big pace breaker. Supposedly, according to Warmonger, he read something that in a future patch soon here this week, they're gonna make it so that you don't need to pick up each individual organ, which will be a lot better for clearing maps and everything. I found that definitely picking up each individual one is definitely a pace breaker, especially if you have high clear speed. To be completely honest, I'm kind of surprised that GGG didn't think of that before, considering the nature of the top players that will actually get to endgame. So that is interesting. So yeah, so difficulty wise, the increase in difficulty overall has been interesting to say the least. They have increased like the physical damage reduction that enemies have, the elemental resists, and life pretty much across the board, making the game overall more difficult. And this is the skill tree that I have right now, my Cyclone character. So the difficulty increases. Supposedly the difficulty increases mainly for kind of geared towards those players that would clear stuff insanely quickly and would one-shot bosses and everything. And honestly, the changes, in my mind anyway, do not look like they would affect those players whatsoever. They're still gonna, I mean, it might change a one-shot to a two-shot, but that's it. For those players, I just don't think it's gonna make any difference for those players. But the problem is, they made, for me anyway, from my experience, rares and unique enemies are now insanely tanky. An example, well, even with that Metamorph, I have 20,000 DPS, and that's without calculating my taunt and enemies cannot evade and damage increases. So with Fortify on here, I probably have like 30k plus DPS, and that Metamorph was still quite tanky by itself. But when I was leveling, basically I would pretty much avoid rare enemies altogether, pretty much, because they had so much health that it was, in my mind anyway, it was just a waste of time to kill them, which is kind of a problem when, I mean, wouldn't you want the rare enemies to be targeted for extra loot or experience? But no, they were so tanky in comparison to even the magic enemies that I would just avoid them pretty much throughout my leveling experience until I got near the end game where I had my ascendancies more set up, like having Worthy Foe and Unstoppable Hero. I would just avoid them altogether, and I had some experiences where a few rare enemies were actually seemingly more tanky than unique story bosses. Like, how does that even work? In all seriousness, like, how does a rare enemy have more health and tankiness than a unique story boss? And they did add some new skills to the unique story bosses, like Merveil, with the water geysers, now fills up like 75% of the arena from when I faced her. And the first phase of her, she now summons more minions. So, and then there were a few odds and ends of bosses that did get new skills, but it was mainly the increase in tankiness. And for overall, I think the balance changes, I think they're fine for experienced players, but new players, I'm really worried that they will find that this game, not only is it intimidating to see this huge thing at the start, as well as figuring out all the skills, but especially for Merveil, like, this is the first time that I had a lot of trouble with Merveil. She's literally the second story boss, like the first act boss, and I was having quite a bit of trouble with it. I mean, I didn't have Cyclone yet, so I had to use Double Strike, but I mean, I just think that some players might go into this and fight, you know, Merveil or, you know, like the one of the other act bosses, and just be like, this is too hard to figure out, I'm just going to be done. So that is kind of my fear there. And it just feels like some unique enemies, like the tier 7 act boss, Alakali, I think it was, I had roughly 8,000 DPS, which in my mind is quite respectable at that amount of in the story. And Alakali would just refuse to die. Like, I would do such little damage to it that I don't know. And with me using claws, like, my life gain on hit was so much that typically I wouldn't have to worry about defense. So yeah, I just think that, especially for them making the early game bosses especially tankier, creates a lot of problems for new players. And I found that the early game this time was harder than the second half. Like, Act 6 through 10 I found was easier than Act 1 through 5, which is really backwards. So, more on to the Atlas changes. So the Atlas has been completely changed. You start in the center this time, and you work your way out, and you find these citadels, I guess they're called, and you put watchstones in them from defeating the new bosses, the Conquerors of the Atlas, where the update gets its name. And then once you have all of, like, if you have 4 watchstones in one, then it raises the tiers of maps in this area up to tier 16 if you have all 4 in there. And it also makes it so that there are more maps in that region per watchstone in there, which is interesting. And this was the main thing why I haven't done this review yet, was because I was really trying to fight one of the Conquerors to see how how to upgrade the Atlas and get higher tier maps. And this is kind of a major problem with the new update, in my mind anyway. I'm level 83, okay? So a whole lot higher than level 70. 70 and 71 that these low tiers are. Me and Warmonger have only done a handful of tier 4s, and we have been, pretty actively trying to get higher tier maps, and we haven't gone out of our way to buy any necessarily, but it's kind of looking like you pretty much have to buy some maps, or at least you're gonna be in it for a long haul, because I found that the Atlas progression is insanely slow to what I would like. The old Atlas progression was slow, in my mind already, but this map progression is just way too much. We have done 25 maps. I have done an alright amount of delving, but not over excessive in my mind. So, I have gotten a few, 2 or 3 levels from that. But I would think at my level, I would be doing tier 6 or 7 maps by now. Roughly. And instead, I'm doing, just getting to tier 4s. So, I don't know. I think the biggest problem is that you have some of these that it's you go from a tier 2 to another tier 2. You don't go from a tier 2 to a tier 3 necessarily anymore until you fill out your Atlas with the watchstones. The level does not increase really much at all. And I just watched a video from Ziggy D. I primarily wanted to fight the Conquerors on my own, figure that by myself, but watching Ziggy D's video of how you're supposed to fight the Conquerors, it sounds like a massive pain, because you have to do one of these corner maps. You have to find the Conqueror in that region, and then you have to find them 2 more times after you find them the first time, and then you finally get to fight them. What? It's a pain just to get to the corners in the first place this time, and then I have to do find them 3 times, which sounds like it might be RNG based anyway, to finally get to higher tier maps. That sounds like a massive pain in the butt, really. So, I like the story changes that they did, even though that I am quite sad that Shaper and Elder are no longer the focus of this league, since they're so iconic characters. But the progression in the Atlas now, it just feels so sluggish and slow that seriously, after this amount, I'm really getting burnt out already. Typically I get burnt out by high 80s, 90s, early 90s before I need to take an extended break. to get back into it again. With my character, I was actually hoping that I would get in the 90s pretty quickly, but this progression, even though that it sounds good on paper, it just feels way too slow. I'm sorry, it just does. So overall, MetaMorph League is pretty good. It does what it does well. The Conquerors of the Atlas expansion, while it sounds good on paper, like I said, the progression is just way too slow to get the higher tier maps. And it sounds like if you figure out a way to kill the Conquerors right away, you can just like jump to tier 16 maps like instantly, and depending on how you do it, you might be only like in the early 80s if you focus on that exclusively, never do delving or anything like that. So you go from like level 80 to like level 83 area maps. Like, that's pretty drastic. So I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I guess I'm gonna have to do a little bit more, get my first watchstone, and then see how I feel about it. But currently, in this review, it's tough. It's quite tough. So with that, the Path of Exile 2 announcement in Exilecon earlier this year. First of all, Path of Exile 2 gets me seriously hyped for it. Primarily because out of all the changes, what excites me the most is the ability to have multiple 6 links, up to 8 or 9, I think they said, 6 links instead of just having one. That excites me quite a bit, because then I can do crazy stuff like have my movement skill be a 6 link, or my totems, Ancestral Warchief and Ancestral Protector, as a 6 link, that previously you would be pretty crazy enough to do unless, well, I mean, if you're doing a totem build, maybe you could make these two work, but I mean, like, especially movement skills, like having a 6 link flame dash on its own, like for damage, like,
glad you made it
at
back.
this point,
Stay safe.
that would be pretty crazy to invest in. But then it allows us to create more crazy ways to have either special effects or increases in damage that we never thought of before. For an example, for Path of Exile 2 movement, in my Path of Building, I had on there my Whirling Blades movement skill with Fortify, Nightblade to get elusive, increased critical strikes, faster attacks, and then melee slash. Like, having that on there, like, just to give me those special effects without needing to put them in my main skill, like, that's crazy to think about. Currently I have a Nightblade on my Cyclone because of the corrupted 6 link that I have, but all I have to say is that Nightblade getting that elusive to get that movement speed feels really nice. And then for like the Ancestral Warchief and Protector, for a 6 link, another example is that I was thinking of having one of them do a Curse on Hit setup, and then the other one do like Chance to Bleed and Maim and stuff, and then from that be able to use Bloodlust support, I think it is. I forget. Yeah, Bloodlust support on Cyclone, you know, to get that extra boost in damage. Like, it opens up so many possibilities. It gets me really hyped up for it. The visuals of Path of Exile 2 look really good. I mean, Path of Exile looks like a pretty good game on its own already, but they improved it very, very nicely. It sounded like they did update Line Eyes Watch to be more graphically enhanced, and I do see it. It definitely looks better than before. I think that the rain effects are definitely nicer as well. Like, you know, see, I'm not sure if they had this before or not, but they have, you can see the rain on the ground, and then the light reflection is better than before, as well as that new art looks really nice. So, with that, Path of Exile 2, like, that's the main thing that I am hyped for. The 7-act new story, it sounds like it's going to be nice. It's going to be refreshing to play that rather than playing the 10-act storyline over each league, that you get a choice of 2 different campaigns from that. And I think that will be a nice breath of fresh air to have. But at the same time, I do have a few worries on that. Judging by the nature of Path of Exile, everyone going through the storyline as fast as possible, I just feel like it's just gonna, the new acts, the 7-act storyline, as good as it might be, that's just gonna, what is gonna end up happening. People will just go through it as fast as they can just to get to endgame because it's more profitable. And that's it. Like, they, in a sense of having the campaign be fluff in that sense. And for the 10-act storyline, I definitely kind of feel that way. Every time I create a new league, trying to get to endgame, I mean, these days I have the excuse of making a review of it, but the leveling process, as enjoyable as it might be, it does definitely feel like fluff at the end of the day. And I just feel like the 7-act storyline is just going to end up being that, no matter how good it might be. So that's another worry. So with all of these changes, do I think Path of Exile is a better game now that they made it harder, now that they've done the new Atlas changes? I think the increase in difficulty, especially in the early game, was just unnecessary. Because, like I said, it really makes me worried for new players. Like, not only do they have the skill tree to worry about and figuring out what skills they like, but now they have to deal with difficulty. Like, before, in my mind, like, you could probably do like the first 3 or 4 acts doing whatever you feel like without even knowing how support gems work or anything. But now you pretty much should know that right from the get-go, unfortunately. The difficulty in the endgame, it's really hard to say. I never really... I didn't really like the idea of them increasing the difficulty, since the endgame, or at least like the tier 16s with the rare corrupted mods, were already hard, and now they're even harder. So I don't know. I think at the end of the day, it's gonna be fine if I create a good enough build, which this character seems to be good enough. But with the rares and uniques being so much more tanky, I find it more annoying than satisfying to kill them with what I got. But I don't know. I guess time will tell. they're probably going to have to buff up the difficulty of everything again when Path of Exile 2 comes out, now that we have sources, multiple sources of secondary damage, like I said, or effects to buff your main skill. So overall, Metamorph is alright. The balance changes I'm really iffy on, and then the Conquerors of the Atlas, the progression is just so slow that honestly I really don't like it because of that. And that's pretty much it. Like, the concept is good, but the execution is not the best, in my mind anyway. So with that, that's my review of the new balance changes. So thank you very much for watching, and have a wonderful day.